Hi, I'm Professor Richard Scott Noakes, and this is the mini lecture for the Odyssey. The Odyssey sometimes can be confusing, I think, for first-time readers because it's not told in a straightforward manner. The action jumps around a little bit. It opens, in fact, with Telemachus, the son of Odysseus, and for 5 books he basically wonders where his father is and is searching for his father. And only then do we find out that his father is on Calypso's island, where he's being kept as a kind of a consort or essentially a kind of sex slave. And eventually what happens, of course, is Odysseus, through the help of Athena, is able to leave the island, and then he washes up on the island of the Phaeacians, and he tells them his story. And so much of the story, in fact, the part that we normally think about is the adventure where he faces the Cyclops and meets the King of the Winds and the island of the Lotus Eaters and all this sort of action and swashbuckling, that all happens in flashback form because that is what happened before he got to the island of Calypso, and he's explaining to them how this happened. And then, of course, the action jumps up again to the present when he's done with that flashback. He heads off back home to Ithaca, gets together with his son, and then the story comes to its completion. So Homer doesn't tell this from the beginning straight forward to the end. Instead, he jumps around a little bit. And one thing to, I think about is, why might he do that? You know, what might be gained from this? And I think there is quite a bit to be gained from that. And in fact, one of our prompts is the Odyssey is ostensibly about Odysseus, but the first 5 books are really about Telemachus. Why, and what's the point of that? And I think in order to think about that, you also have to consider that in creating the Odyssey, Homer chose not to open with Odysseus, and he chose not to have a straightforward things start at the beginning and move forward to the climax, but rather have these large flashbacks in the center and to jump from action back and forth between Ithaca and wherever Odysseus was. And think about that, I think, as part of that question. Now, the central conflict in the Odyssey has to do not with monsters or creatures or even a voyage, but rather it has to do with spiritual values. One of the issues that Odysseus faces is that he is interested in getting home to his family. Think about this. Odysseus is on an island, essentially being kept as a sex slave by Calypso. He has all of his physical needs, any food he would need, any physical comforts, and he has sex with a magical, he keeps as a lover a magical goddess who will never age, and he chooses to give all that up. And even when she says that she can give him immortality, he still chooses to give that up and go home back to Ithaca, where not only will he have to struggle, but he doesn't even know whether his wife Penelope is even waiting for him anymore. Several times in the story, we're told about the story of Agamemnon, and how Agamemnon, when he returned home from the Trojan War, he found that his wife was not waiting for him, and instead her lover was lying in wait for him, and he was killed. So Odysseus doesn't know what's going to happen when he gets back to Ithaca, yet he still chooses to do that. And in this, I think, Homer is demonstrating to us some of the more important values. As Odysseus goes on his journey, various members of his crew continuously choose the wrong things. They continuously choose material things over the greater spiritual value of home. So, for example, when they go to the Isle of the Lotus Eaters, many of them, they become, in essence, addicted to the lotus. And that pleasure is something that they would rather pursue than going home to their families. When they get the bag of winds, and they don't know what's in it, they are within sight of Ithaca. They have not been home for a decade at this point. And yet now they can finally see home, but the only thing they can think about rather than being home with their families is what could be in that bag. Could it be treasure? And of course they open the bag and it brings ruin upon them. Again and again and again, they choose material things. They will eat the cattle of the sun god rather than choose to honor the sun god, even if that means going hungry. Whereas Odysseus, even though he is not perfect in this, Odysseus understands these greater spiritual values. And so, as we go through the Odyssey, we see this value demonstrated until we get to the end, which has this wonderful confrontation between Penelope and Odysseus. And Penelope says to Odysseus, who she's not sure is her husband, even though he claims to be, because she hasn't seen him in 20 years. She tests him by talking about how their bed has been moved. And Odysseus, of course, passes this test, which is a kind of riddle. And he says, well, I know that that's not true because I built the bed and I carved it out of an olive stump and then I built the house around it. So the bed cannot be moved. It's permanently part of the structure. In that, it's not simply a plot device that Homer uses to demonstrate to Penelope that Odysseus is indeed her long-lost husband, but rather this also demonstrates an essential truth that we find in the Odyssey, which is a truth about what it means to be a man. And what it means to be a man is not, as with the lotus eaters, that you take physical pleasure while ignoring the important values of home. It's not that you will fall upon a banquet table and eat greedily without concern of hospitality. It's none of those things. Instead, it is that what a man does, what a real man does, is he goes home and does what Odysseus does. His love with Penelope, literally and symbolically, their house is built around their bedchamber. Their house and their household is built around their love. And there's nothing that Calypso or anyone else has to offer him that can be compared to the value, the spiritual virtue that his wife has to offer him when he returns to his home. Which, by the way, leads to our second prompt for this week, which is all the adventures of Odysseus are against the backdrop of the Trojan War. The Trojan War occurs before the action of Odysseus. When Telemachus goes out and is talking to the various old men, they tell them about his father's exploits of the Trojan War. How does that, the understanding that this all grows out of the Trojan War, affect our reading of the epic?